Commander Zexthal stood on the bridge of his massive warship and watched another planet burn. The blue flames rose high into the atmosphere as Vorthan crystal ships rained death from above. This was the fourth world they had lost this month. The fifth world this year. He had stopped counting after the first 100. The war had been going on for 12 long years now. 12 years of watching good soldiers die. 12 years of seeing entire civilizations reduced to ash and rubble. 12 years of following the same battle plans that never seemed to work against the Vorthan Empire. "Sir, we're receiving another surrender transmission from the surface," his communications officer reported. The young Altarian's voice shook with exhaustion. They were all tired. Everyone in the Galactic Council fleet was tired. Zexthal nodded slowly. "Accept their surrender. Order the medical ships to begin evacuation procedures." He turned away from the view screen. He could not bear to watch another world die. The Galactic Council had been the most powerful alliance in the galaxy before this war started. 57 different species working together for peace and prosperity. They had the best technology, the smartest scientists, and the most advanced weapons. But none of that seemed to matter against the Vorthan Empire. The Vorthans were different from other species. They were made of living crystal that could repair itself. Their ships were grown rather than built. Their weapons drew power directly from nearby stars. They fought with a cold efficiency that terrified even the bravest council soldiers. What made it worse was how the Vorthans fought. They followed no rules. They attacked civilian targets. They poisoned entire atmospheres. They turned captured prisoners into living weapons. The council forces, bound by the galactic rules of warfare, could not respond in kind. "Commander, we have an incoming message from High Command," the communications officer announced. Zexthal sighed. More orders to retreat, probably. More strategic withdrawals. More worlds to abandon. Put it through. General Crixinal reptilian face appeared on the main screen. The Council's supreme military commander looked older than when the war started. His scales had lost their bright green color, and his eyes held the weight of countless defeats. "Commander Zexthal, I have new orders for your fleet," Crixinal began. "You are to proceed immediately to the Sol system in Sector 77 Alpha. We may have found new allies." Zexthal raised his eyebrows. New allies? After 12 years of war, most species wanted nothing to do with the conflict. "Sir, may I ask what species we're dealing with?" "I'm not familiar with that sector." "They call themselves humans," Crixinal replied. "They've just achieved faster-than-light travel. Our scouts report they have a single inhabited world but show remarkable technological advancement for such a young species. With respect, General, what can one primitive world offer us that we don't already have?" Zexthal asked. "We've lost entire star systems to the Vorthans. How can one small planet make a difference?" Crixinal's expression grew thoughtful. "Our analysis of their broadcast transmissions is interesting. These humans appear to have been fighting wars continuously for their entire recorded history. 3,000 years of constant conflict on a single world. They might have tactical knowledge we lack." The transmission ended, leaving Zexthal alone with his thoughts. 3,000 years of war on one planet? That seemed impossible. Most species achieve peace within a few centuries of developing advanced weapons. How could any civilization survive that long while fighting itself? 2 days later, Zexthal's fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system. The third planet from the star was beautiful: blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. It looked peaceful from a distance. But as they moved closer, their sensors detected something troubling. The planet was covered with military installations. Every continent had dozens of missile silos, radar stations, and military bases. The orbital space around the planet was filled with weapons platforms and defensive satellites. These humans had turned their entire world into a fortress. "Sir, we're being scanned by multiple targeting systems," his tactical officer reported nervously. "They have weapons locked onto our ships. Raise shields and broadcast our peaceful intentions," Zexthal ordered. "Make sure they know we're not here to attack." A few tense minutes passed before they received a response. The human who appeared. On their screen was wearing a dark blue uniform with strange symbols on his chest. He had short brown hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is Admiral Ron Blake of the Earth Defense Force," the human said in a clear, strong voice. "You're in restricted space. State your business or prepare to be fired upon." Zexthel was impressed despite himself. These humans didn't seem afraid of his massive fleet. Their small ships looked primitive compared to Council technology, but they flew in tight formations that spoke of excellent training and discipline. "Admiral Blake, I am Commander Zexthel of the Galactic Council. We come seeking an audience with your leadership. We have a proposal that could benefit both our peoples." The human studied him for a long moment. "You'll have to park your fleet at the edge of the system. One ship only can approach Earth, and you'll submit to escort by our vessels." Zexthel agreed to their terms. As his flagship moved toward Earth with a human escort, he observed their military more closely. The human ships were small but fast. They moved unpredictably, changing course and speed without apparent pattern. Their formations shifted constantly, never staying in the same configuration for more than a few minutes. "Interesting tactics," his tactical officer observed. "They don't follow any standard battle doctrine I recognize." When they reached Earth's orbit, Zexthel was invited to meet with the human leadership in a place called New York. The city was enormous, with millions of humans living in towering structures of metal and glass. But even in this civilian center, he noticed military presence everywhere, soldiers on street corners, aircraft patrolling overhead, checkpoints at major intersections. The United Nations building was where Earth's leaders gathered to make important decisions. Zexthel found himself facing dozens of humans from different nations and cultures, all watching him with curious but cautious eyes. President Lisa Carter spoke for the group. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. "Commander Zexthel, we've received preliminary information about your war from our radio telescopes. Tell us why we should get involved in a conflict that's been going on longer than our oldest civilizations." Zexthel explained the situation honestly. The Galactic Council was losing. The Vorthans were too strong, too ruthless, too willing to break every rule of civilized warfare. Without help, the Council would fall within the next few years. After that, the Vorthans would likely expand beyond the galaxy's core, eventually reaching species like humanity. "What can you offer us in return?" asked General Patricia Stone, the human military leader. "Full Council membership, advanced technology, access to galactic trade networks, and protection under Council law," Zexthel replied. "But I must be honest, we need your help more than you need ours." The humans discussed among themselves for hours. Zexthel listened to their debates with growing interest. They talked about military strategy with a sophistication that surprised him. They understood concepts like logistics, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare that even advanced Council species sometimes overlooked. Finally, President Carter spoke again. "We'll help you, Commander, but we do this our way. No interference with human military doctrine, no restrictions on our tactical choices. And if we're going to fight, we fight to win." Zexthel agreed immediately. After 12 years of following rules that only helped their enemies, he was ready to try anything new. Even if it meant working with a species that had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of war. 3 weeks after the agreement was signed, Colonel Amy Torres arrived at Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council's main military base. The space station was enormous, bigger than most moons, with docking bays that could hold 1,000 ships. But what impressed Torres most was how organized everything looked. Too organized. She walked through corridors lined with aliens of every shape and size. Tall, graceful beings with blue skin worked alongside short, furry creatures with 6 arms. Reptilian soldiers stood guard next to floating jellyfish-like entities that communicated through color changes. It was like nothing she had ever seen. General Crixinal met her in the main command center. The reptilian commander was even bigger. In person, standing nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his posture rigid and formal. "Colonel Torres, welcome to Nexus Prime," Crixinal said in his deep, rumbling voice. I trust your journey was comfortable? It was fine, General. Thank you. Torres looked around. The command center. Dozens of aliens worked at stations covered with holographic displays and blinking lights. Everything moved with clockwork precision. Every action seemed planned and scheduled. Impressive setup you have here. We pride ourselves on efficiency and order, Crixenol replied. The Council military operates under strict protocols that have served us well for thousands of years. I assume your forces will need time to learn our procedures? Torres smiled. Actually, General, I was hoping to learn about your current tactics first. Maybe you could show me how you've been fighting this war? Crixenol led her to a massive holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red zones marked Vorthan territory, blue zones showed Council space, and purple areas indicated contested systems. The red zones were growing larger while the blue zones shrank. Our standard engagement protocol begins with formal communication to the enemy, Crixenol explained. We announce our intention to attack, specify the time and location of battle, and allow non-combatants to evacuate. Then our fleets meet at the designated coordinates for combat. Torres stared at him. You tell them when and where you're going to attack? Of course. The galactic rules of warfare require proper notification. It would be uncivilized to attack without warning. And the Vorthans follow these same rules? Crixenol's expression darkened. Unfortunately, the Vorthans have shown little respect for civilized conduct. They often attack before the scheduled time or target civilian areas. But we cannot lower ourselves to their barbaric methods. Torres nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand why this war had lasted 12 years. General, could you show me some recent battle footage? I'd like to see how these engagements typically unfold. The holographic display changed to show a recent battle at the Kepler system. Council ships approached in perfect formation, flying in neat lines and geometric patterns. Their weapons fired in synchronized volleys. Everything looked like a carefully choreographed dance. The Vorthan ships moved differently. They swarmed like angry insects, attacking from multiple directions at once. They ignored the Council's formation patterns and struck wherever the enemy looked weakest. When Council ships tried to respond, the Vorthans had already moved to attack somewhere else. I see the problem, Torres said quietly. What problem? Crixenol asked. You're fighting by rules they don't follow. You're playing chess while they're playing football. Crixenol looked confused. I do not understand these references. Torres sighed. This was going to be harder than she thought. General, may I ask why you follow these warfare rules so strictly? Because we are civilized beings, Crixenol replied firmly. The rules of warfare exist to prevent unnecessary suffering and maintain honor in combat. Without them, war becomes mere brutality. And how's that working out for you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Crixenol's scales shifted to a darker shade of green, which Torres had learned indicated anger or frustration in his species. Colonel Torres, I appreciate that humans have different military traditions, Crixenol said stiffly. But the Council has fought wars for millennia using these methods. We cannot simply abandon our principles because of temporary setbacks. Temporary setbacks? Torres pulled up the galactic map again. General, you've lost over 200 worlds in 12 years. At this rate, the Council will cease to exist within 5 years. That's not a temporary setback, that's extinction. The next few hours were difficult. Torres met with other Council military leaders, each more rigid than the last. They showed her detailed battle plans that read like academic papers. Every move was calculated, every action planned months in advance. There was no room for improvisation or adaptation. Commander Valkyris of the Centauri Federation was particularly frustrating. The tall, elegant alien insisted that their energy weapons were superior to primitive human ballistic systems. When Torres suggested that kinetic weapons might be more effective against Vorthan crystal armor, Valkyris dismissed the idea as barbaric. We do not throw rocks at our enemies, Colonel, Valkyris said with obvious disdain. We are not primitives, Torres bit back her first response. Instead, she asked to see their weapons testing data. The results were revealing. Council energy weapons were indeed powerful, but they dispersed when they hit Vorthan crystal structures. The living crystal absorbed and redirected much of the energy, reducing the weapon's effectiveness. "Has anyone tried physical impact weapons?" Torres asked. "Such crude methods are beneath us," Velcris replied. That evening, Torres met with Captain Ben Harper, who had just arrived with the first human fleet. The USS Liberty was docked alongside Council vessels that dwarfed it in size. But Torres noticed that the alien crews kept staring at the human ship with curiosity and concern. "They don't know what to make of us," Harper said as they walked through the Liberty's corridors. "Our ships look primitive to them. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no fancy artificial gravity systems. Just armor plating, missile tubes, and kinetic cannons." "That might work in our favor," Torres replied. "They're underestimating us. The question is whether we can work with them at all." Harper led her to the engineering section, where human and alien technicians were trying to integrate their technologies. The process was not going smoothly. Human engineer Kelly Shaw was arguing with an Altarian scientist about power coupling systems. "Look, your energy matrix is impressive," Shaw was saying, "but it's overly complicated. You've got 17 different safety protocols for a simple power transfer. In combat, that's 17 ways for your system to fail." The Altarian, whose name was difficult for humans to pronounce, responded with obvious frustration. "Human, your systems lack basic safety measures. Your power cores operate at dangerous levels with minimal protection. It is a miracle your ships do not explode regularly." "They don't explode because we know how to build them properly," Shaw shot back. "Simple, reliable, and effective." Torres stepped between them. "Shaw, can you make their shields work on our ships?" "Yes, ma'am. But I'd have to strip out half their safety systems to make them combat effective." Torres turned to the Altarian. "Can you adapt your energy weapons to our targeting systems?" "Theoretically, yes. But your targeting computers are so primitive. They lack the sophistication for proper energy weapon control." "But they're fast, right?" The alien nodded reluctantly. "Remarkably fast. Your computers make targeting decisions in microseconds rather than the standard calculation time of several seconds." Torres smiled. "Then we combine them. Fast human targeting with powerful alien weapons. Simple human engineering with advanced alien technology." Over the next several days, Torres worked with both human and alien engineers to create hybrid systems. They installed Council energy shields on human ships, but simplified the control systems for faster response times. They mounted alien energy weapons on human vessels, but used human targeting computers for quicker acquisition. The real breakthrough came when Lieutenant Chris Morgan of Human Intelligence showed Torres something interesting. He had been analyzing Vorthan communication intercepts and discovered a pattern. "Colonel, the Vorthans coordinate their attacks through a central command network," Morgan explained. "Every ship receives orders from regional command centers, which get their orders from sector commanders, who report to the main command ship." Torres studied the data. "So, if we could disrupt their command structure, their entire fleet would lose coordination." "But the Council has never tried attacking command ships directly. The rules of warfare prohibit targeting enemy leadership, except in formal duels," Torres laughed. "Well, nobody told us about that rule." That night, she prepared her first report for Admiral Blake back on Earth. The situation was worse than they had expected, but there were opportunities. The Council had advanced technology but lacked tactical flexibility. The Vorthans were winning because they ignored the rules, but their command structure had weaknesses. Most importantly, the Council military was desperate enough to consider new approaches. They might not like human methods, but they were running out of alternatives. As Torres finished her report, she looked out at the stars through the station's observation deck. Somewhere out there, Vorthan fleets were preparing for their next assault. Admiral Ron Blake stood in the war room aboard the Earth defense ship Liberty, studying tactical displays that showed the Roxy's system. The Vorthans had taken control of the system 3 months ago and were using it as a major supply hub. The Galactic Council wanted to launch an assault to retake it, the plan General Crixinal had presented was typical Council strategy. Send a formal declaration of intent to attack. Wait 48 hours for civilian evacuation. Approach the system in formation at the agreed time. Engage in battle at the designated coordinates. Blake shook his head as he read through the battle plan. Commander Torres, tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing here. Torres looked up from her datapad. If you mean a suicide mission disguised as a formal military engagement, then yes, sir. Captain Harper joined them at the tactical display. The Vorthans will have 48 hours to prepare their defenses and bring in reinforcements. By the time we arrive, they'll be ready for us. It gets worse, said Lieutenant Morgan, the intelligence officer. My analysis shows the Vorthans have been using Council predictability against them. They position their strongest forces exactly where they know the Council will attack. Blake studied the holographic display of the Raxes system. 7 planets orbited a yellow star, with the Vorthans concentrated on the 4th planet and its 3 moons. Their crystal ships formed defensive patterns around key installations. Everything looked exactly as expected. What if we didn't tell? Then we were coming? Blake asked. Torres smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say, sir. But Admiral, protested Commander Velcris, who had been listening to their conversation. The rules of warfare clearly state that all military actions must be announced in advance. Surprise attacks are considered acts of barbarism. Blake turned to face the Centauri officer. Commander, how many worlds has the Council lost following these rules? That is not relevant to the discussion of proper military conduct, Velcris replied stiffly. It's the only thing that's relevant, Blake shot back. Your people are dying because you're more concerned with looking civilized than winning wars? The tension in the room was thick. Other alien officers looked uncomfortable. As Blake challenged everything they believed about warfare, General Crixinal entered the war room at that moment, sensing the heated discussion. Is there a problem here? The reptilian commander asked. Blake decided to be direct. General, I'm requesting permission to modify the Raxes assault plan. What modifications do you propose? No advance warning? No formal announcement? We hit them when they're not expecting it. Crixinal S scales shifted to a darker green. Admiral Blake, such tactics violate every principle of civilized warfare. We cannot simply abandon our moral standards. General, with respect, your moral standards are getting your people killed, Blake replied. The Vorthans don't follow your rules. They attack civilian targets, use biological weapons, and torture prisoners. But you're still fighting like this is some kind of gentleman's duel. We fight with honor because that is what separates us from our enemies, Crixinal said firmly. Blake pulled up the tactical display showing recent battle losses. This honor has cost you 200 worlds and millions of lives. How many more? People have to die before you realize the Vorthans don't care about your honor? The room fell silent. Blake could see the struggle in Crixinal's eyes. The general knew the human was right, but admitting it meant abandoning centuries of military tradition. Commander Torres stepped forward. General, what if we ran a small test? Nothing major. Just let us try our approach on a minor target and see what happens. What kind of test? Crixinal asked. Lieutenant Morgan activated a different tactical display. There's a Vorthan communication relay station in the Kepler sector. Small garrison, minimal defenses, but strategically important. If we could take it out quietly, it would disrupt their command network for this entire region. How would you accomplish this without formal engagement protocols? Asked Commander Velcris. Blake smiled. We don't announce we're coming. We approach from an unexpected direction. We hit fast and hard before they can respond. The whole operation takes maybe 30 minutes instead of 3 days. This is highly irregular, Crixinal muttered, but Blake could see he was considering it. General, Torres added, if our approach fails, we fall back and do things your way. But if it works, maybe we can start winning this war instead of just managing our defeats. 3 days later, a small mixed fleet approached the Vorthan relay station. The force consisted of 2 human destroyers, 1 council cruiser, and 3 support vessels. They had spent the previous day practicing coordinated maneuvers, which had been an education for both sides. Captain Harper commanded the lead destroyer, the USS Boston. His bridge crew was half human, half alien, which created interesting dynamics. The human officers made quick decisions and adapted rapidly to changing situations. The alien officers provided technical expertise and managed the advanced systems. "Approaching target coordinates," announced Navigator Lisa Grant. "Vorthen Station is exactly where intelligence said it would be." The relay station was a crystalline structure about the size of a city block, orbiting a dead moon. Sensor readings showed minimal defenses and a small crew. According to Council doctrine, this target would require a formal 3-day assault with proper warnings and evacuation. Periods. "All ships, this is Harper," the captain announced over the communication channel. "Remember, we go in fast, hit the primary target, and get out. No heroics, no extended engagements. Simple and clean." The alien officers on other ships were nervous about the unconventional approach, but they had agreed to try human tactics. The mixed crews had trained together for days, learning to combine alien technology with human strategy. "Target acquired," reported Weapons Officer Don Kelly. "Kinetic weapons locked on primary structure. Energy weapons charged and ready." "Fire," Harper ordered. The attack lasted 18 minutes. Human kinetic weapons punched through the stations. Crystal structure, while alien energy beams severed critical connections. The Vorthens never had time to mount an effective defense or call for help. By the time they realized they were under attack, their communication array was destroyed. The result was exactly what Lieutenant Morgan had predicted: Vorthen forces throughout the sector lost contact with their command structure. Ships that had been coordinating complex operations suddenly found themselves operating blind. 3 different Vorthen fleets began moving in random directions, trying to re-establish communication. General Crixenel was waiting for them when they returned to Nexus Prime. His expression was unreadable as he reviewed the mission reports. The operation had been a complete success with 0 casualties on their side. 18 minutes, Crixenel said quietly. "You destroyed a target that would have taken us 3 days to assault properly. And nobody had to die doing it," Blake added. "No long siege, no prolonged battle, no massive casualties. Just quick, efficient action." "The Vorthens in that sector are completely disorganized," Torres reported. "Our intelligence shows they're trying to re-establish command networks, but it will take them days to sort out the confusion." Crixenel studied the tactical displays showing Vorthen ships wandering aimlessly without coordination. It was the first time in 12 years that the enemy had looked vulnerable. "This approach could work on a larger scale," the general admitted. Reluctantly. "It will work better on a larger scale," Blake corrected. "The more targets we hit simultaneously, the more chaos we create in their command structure. Instead of fighting one battle at a time, we fight everywhere at once." Commander Valkyris looked troubled. "But the scale of coordination required. Our forces are not trained for such complex operations." "Then we train them," Torres said simply. "We've got human officers who can teach rapid response tactics. We've got alien officers who understand the technology. We combine the best of both approaches." Over the next 2 weeks, Blake pushed for more unconventional operations. Small human-alien teams struck communication relays, supply depots, and command posts throughout Vorthen space. Each mission was planned and executed without warning, completed before the enemy could respond effectively. The psychological effect on Vorthen forces was immediate. They began expecting attacks that never came while missing attacks that hit targets they thought were safe. Their rigid command structure, which depended on predictable enemy behavior, began to crack under the pressure of constant uncertainty. More importantly, the mixed human-alien crews were learning to work together effectively. Human flexibility combined with alien technology created new tactical possibilities that neither side had considered before. Blake stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching human and alien officers work together on battle plans. The sight would have been impossible just months ago. Now it looked like the future of galactic warfare. "Admiral," Torres said, approaching with a datapad. General Crixinal has approved the Raxy's assault. But he wants to use our approach? Blake smiled. No advance warning? No advance warning. Multiple simultaneous strikes. Hit them before they know we're coming. Blake looked out at the stars where Vorthan fleets waited in their predictable formations. After 12 years of fighting the same war the same way, everything was about to change. Admiral Blake stood in the command center of the massive station at 0200 Galactic Standard Time. Around him, hundreds of officers from dozens of species worked at their stations, preparing for the largest military operation in galactic history. The war that had dragged on for 12 years was about to end in the next few hours. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. 17 different fleets would strike 17 different Vorthan systems simultaneously. No warnings, no announcements, no time for the enemy to prepare. Just overwhelming force applied everywhere at once. All fleet commanders report ready status, announced Communications Officer Karen Walsh from her station. She had been working for 18 hours straight, coordinating with ships spread across half the galaxy. Blake looked at the massive tactical display showing the positions of every Council fleet. Red dots marked Vorthan targets while blue dots showed attacking forces. Green lines connected each fleet to its assigned objective. It looked like a complex web spanning the entire galaxy. "Admiral, this is Captain Harper aboard the Liberty," came a voice over the communication system. "Strike Force Alpha is in position at the Nexus Tertius system. All ships report ready for assault." Harper's fleet was responsible for the most important target, the Vorthan Command Fortress where Emperor Zarthan directed the entire war effort. The fortress was massive, built into an asteroid and protected by hundreds of defensive platforms. Taking it would cut the head off the Vorthan. Military snake. "Strike Force Beta is in position," reported Commander Torres from her flagship. Her mixed human-alien fleet was tasked with capturing the main Vorthan shipyards. Without those facilities, the enemy could not replace their losses. One by one, fleet commanders checked in from across the galaxy. Admiral Patricia Stone commanded a force attacking Vorthan supply depots. Colonel Gary Brooks led an assault on their main training facilities. Captain Lisa Grant was positioned to strike communication networks. Each fleet had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Human officers had trained alien crews in rapid assault tactics. Alien engineers had modified human ships with advanced technology. The result was a combined force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Sir, we're receiving the final intelligence reports," said Lieutenant Morgan, handling the last-minute reconnaissance data. "Vorthan forces are positioned exactly as predicted. They're expecting a traditional Council assault on the Raxy system, not simultaneous attacks across 17 systems." Blake nodded. The Raxy system had been used as a decoy, with Council forces making obvious preparations for a conventional assault there. Vorthan intelligence had detected these preparations and moved reinforcements to defend against the expected attack. Meanwhile, the real targets remained lightly defended. "Time check," Blake called out. 0258 hours, sir," Walsh replied. 2 minutes to go." Blake activated the galaxy-wide communication channel that connected him to every ship in the operation. Thousands of human and alien faces appeared on screens throughout the command center. "All commanders, this is Admiral Blake. In 2 minutes, we begin the operation that will end this war. For 12 years, the galaxy has suffered under Vorthan aggression. Today, we remind them that freedom is not negotiable. All fleets, prepare to engage on my mark." At 0300 hours exactly, Blake gave the order that changed galactic history. "All fleets, execute Operation Thunderbolt. Take them down." Captain Harper was the first to reach his target. The Liberty and her escort ships emerged from hyperspace directly above the Vorthan command fortress. Instead of approaching from the usual vector where defensive weapons expected them, they came in through the asteroid field that surrounded the facility. "All weapons, target the main command tower," Harper ordered. "Kinetic rounds first, then energy weapons. We need to punch through their crystal armor before they can adapt." The human-designed kinetic weapons fired first, sending tungsten rods at incredible velocity into the fortress structure. The impact cracked the living crystal walls, creating weak points for the alien energy weapons to exploit. The combination was devastatingly effective. "Direct hit on the command center," reported Weapons Officer Kelly. "Their communication array is down? The fortress is going silent." Meanwhile, Commander Torres led her fleet against the Vorthan shipyards at Kepler Station. The facility was enormous, capable of producing 100 ships per month. Destroying it would cripple Vorthan military production for years. "Remember, we want to capture this facility intact if possible," Torres announced to her fleet. "Target the defensive platforms first, then move in for boarding operations." The attack was swift and precise. Human Marines trained in zero-gravity combat fought through the station corridors alongside alien soldiers. The Vorthans, caught completely off guard, offered scattered resistance but could not mount an organized defense. "Shipyard secured," Torres reported to Blake 30 minutes after the attack began. "We've captured the entire facility and taken over 300 prisoners, including the chief engineer." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at 16 other locations. Admiral Stone's forces overwhelmed the supply depots at Tau Ceti, capturing enough materials to supply the Vorthan fleet for months. Colonel Brooks seized the training academies where new Vorthan officers learned their tactics. Along with all their strategic databases, the psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Vorthan commanders throughout the galaxy found themselves cut off from their superiors, unable to coordinate with other units, and facing attacks they had never prepared for. Their rigid command structure, which had served them well against predictable council tactics, collapsed under the human approach of simultaneous strikes. Emperor Zarthan himself was aboard his flagship when Harper's boarding teams reached the command fortress. The Vorthan leader was a massive crystalline being, standing nearly 10 feet tall with faceted skin that reflected light in rainbow patterns. He had ruled the Vorthan Empire for over 2 centuries and had never known defeat. Major Kate Davis led the boarding party that captured the Emperor. Her team used tactics borrowed from ancient naval warfare, fighting through narrow corridors and using grenades to crack crystal barriers. The Vorthans fought bravely, but were not prepared for the human style of close combat. "Your Imperial Majesty," Davis said as her soldiers surrounded the Emperor in his throne room, "I am Major Kate Davis of the Earth Defense Force. You are under arrest for war crimes against the Galactic Council." Zarthan stared at the small human who had just captured him. His translator device struggled with the concept of arrest, as Vorthan culture had no equivalent concept for taking enemy leaders prisoner. "You are not Council forces," the Emperor said in his deep, harmonic voice. "What manner of beings are you?" "We're humans," Davis replied simply. "And this war is over." News of the Emperor's capture spread through Vorthan communication networks faster than reports of the other attacks. Vorthan commanders who had been fighting desperately to regain control of their forces suddenly found themselves without orders or purpose. Many began surrendering immediately upon learning their emperor was prisoner. At 0500 hours, just 2 hours after the attacks began, organized Vorthan resistance started collapsing. Fleet commanders throughout their territory sent surrender messages to the nearest council forces. The sight of their supreme leader in human custody had broken their will to fight. By 0700 hours, Vorthan military headquarters on their homeworld sent an unconditional surrender message to Admiral Blake. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for over a decade was asking for peace terms. Blake stood in the command center, watching surrender messages flood in from across the galaxy. Officers around him cheered and celebrated, but he felt only relief. The killing was finally over. "Sir, we're receiving a formal surrender from the Vorthan High Command," Walsh reported. "They're requesting immediate ceasefire and asking to discuss terms." Blake looked at the tactical display that no longer showed any active combat zones. Red enemy markers were changing to yellow neutral status across the entire galaxy. The war was over. "Accept their surrender," Blake ordered. "And get me a secure channel to Earth," President Carter needs to know that humanity just ended a 12-year war in 5 hours. As reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, the full scope of the victory became clear. 17 major Vorthan installations captured or destroyed. The entire enemy command structure neutralized. Their emperor taken prisoner. Their fleet surrendering without further combat. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment everything changed. The moment when humans proved that sometimes the best way to end a war is to fight it so decisively that the enemy has no choice but to surrender. Blake walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Vorthan ships were powering down their weapons and heading home. After 12 years of death and destruction, peace was finally returning to the galaxy, the war was over, and humanity had made it happen in just 5 hours. 6 months after the war ended, Admiral Blake stood in the newly rebuilt council chambers on Nexus Prime. The hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, including dozens of former Vorthan territories that had joined the council after the Empire's surrender. The changes were remarkable. Where once the council had been a loose collection of species bound by ancient traditions, it had become a unified organization focused on practical solutions. The old rigid protocols had been replaced with flexible procedures that could adapt to changing situations. Most importantly, the military had been completely restructured around human tactical principles. The Galactic Defense Force has successfully completed its first major exercise. General Amy Torres reported to the assembled delegates. She now commanded the combined military forces of over 300 worlds. Joint human-alien units responded to simulated threats in less than 2 hours compared to the previous average response time of 3 days. Blake smiled as he listened to the report. Torres had done an excellent job transforming the old council military into something that could actually protect the galaxy. Human officers served alongside aliens at every level, teaching rapid response tactics and flexible thinking. Captain Harper, now an admiral himself, commanded the flagship Enterprise, a massive vessel that combined the best of human and alien technology. His crew included beings from 20 different species, all trained in the new integrated combat doctrines that had proven so effective against the Vorthans. The most significant change has been in our approach to conflict resolution, continued Commander Velcris, who had adapted remarkably well to human methods after initial resistance. Instead of waiting for problems to become wars, we now intervene early with targeted diplomatic and military pressure. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many traditional council members had initially resisted the changes, arguing that human methods were too aggressive or unpredictable, but the results spoke for themselves. In 6 months, the new Galactic Defense Force had prevented 4 potential conflicts and resolved 2 ongoing disputes without a single major battle. Blake looked around the chamber at faces he had come to know well. General Crixonal sat in the front row, his scales now a healthy bright green instead of the tired dark color they had been during the war. The reptilian commander had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after seeing how effective their methods could be. Admiral Blake, called Speaker Zexthal, who now served as the Council's military liaison, perhaps you could address the Assembly about humanity's role in our new defensive structure? Blake stood and walked to the Speaker's platform. 6 months ago, he had been a relatively unknown officer from a small planet that most aliens had never heard of. Now he was one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. Honored delegates. Blake began. 6 months ago, humanity joined a war that had been destroying this galaxy for 12 years. We didn't join because we wanted to fight. We joined because fighting was the only way to restore peace. He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd of beings. What we learned during that conflict was that sometimes the old ways don't work anymore. Sometimes you need to try something new, even if it makes people uncomfortable. The chamber was completely silent. Blake could see alien faces watching him with attention and respect. These were beings whose civilizations were thousands of years older than humanity's, but they were listening to lessons from the newcomers. The Vorthans weren't evil, Blake continued. They were following their own logic, their own rules. But their rules said that might makes right and that the strong should dominate the weak. Our job was to prove them wrong. In the audience, Emperor Zarthan listened carefully. The former Vorthan leader had become an unexpected ally after his capture. Instead of executing him or keeping him imprisoned, the council had offered him a choice: help rebuild the galaxy or spend the rest of his life in isolation. Zarthan had chosen to help. His knowledge of Vorthan technology and culture had been invaluable in integrating former Empire worlds into the council. More importantly, his public support for the new order had convinced many Vorthans to accept the changes peacefully. The war taught us that cooperation is stronger than domination, Zarthan had said in his first public address after the surrender. Humans showed us that victory means building something better, not just destroying your enemies. Blake's speech continued, with an overview of the changes that had transformed galactic civilization. The old galactic rules of warfare had been completely rewritten, incorporating human concepts of rapid response and decisive action. Military academies throughout Council space now taught courses on human tactical thinking alongside traditional alien strategies, but the changes went beyond military matters. Human diplomatic methods had also been adopted throughout the Council. Instead of formal negotiations that could take years, human negotiators preferred direct discussion and quick agreements. Problems that once festered for decades were now resolved in weeks. Trade had also been revolutionized. Human merchants, with their aggressive business practices and willingness to take risks, had opened new markets throughout the galaxy. Goods and services flowed more freely than ever before, creating prosperity even in formerly poor regions. Our scientists are making breakthroughs every day, reported Dr. Kelly Shaw, now head of the Council's research division. Combining human innovation with alien knowledge has led to advances we never thought possible. Shaw's teams had developed new propulsion systems that made space travel faster and cheaper. They had created medical treatments that worked across species barriers. Most importantly, they had designed defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems from future threats. The cultural impact had been equally dramatic. Human entertainment, from movies to music to sports, had spread throughout the galaxy. Alien worlds hosted baseball games and rock concerts alongside their traditional festivals. Human restaurants served food to beings who had never imagined such flavors were possible. But perhaps the most important change, Blake concluded his speech, is that we've learned to see each other as partners instead of competitors. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to succeed together. After the formal session ended, Blake found himself in a smaller meeting room with the Council's leadership. President Carter had arrived from Earth the previous day to participate in the discussions about humanity's expanding role in galactic affairs. Ron, I have to admit, I never imagined it would work out this well, Carter said, reviewing reports on her datapad. When we agreed to help with the war, I thought we'd provide some military assistance and maybe gain access to alien technology. I never expected we'd end up reshaping galactic civilization. Neither did I, Blake replied honestly. But I think that's the point. We didn't come here with a plan to take over. We just tried to solve problems the best way we knew how. General Crixenel joined their conversation. Admiral Blake, I must confess something. When you first arrived, I thought humans were barbarians who would corrupt our civilized ways of doing things. And now? Blake asked with a smile. Now I realize that sometimes barbarians are exactly what civilization needs. Torres approached their group with another report. Sir, I've got the latest numbers from the integration program. Over 90% of former Vorthan military personnel have successfully joined Council forces. Recruitment is up across all species, and we haven't had a single major conflict anywhere in Council space for 4 months. Blake nodded, satisfied. The transition had been smoother than anyone had dared hope. Former enemies were working together. Old prejudices were breaking down. The galaxy was becoming more unified than it had ever been. What's next for humanity? Asked Speaker Zexthal, who had joined their informal gathering. Blake looked out the window at the stars beyond. We keep doing what we've always done. We solve problems, we help our friends. We explore new places and meet new people. And if someone threatens the peace we've built? Carter asked. Blake's expression grew serious. Then we remind them why the Vorthen War ended in 5 hours instead of 5 more years. As the meeting broke up, Blake walked alone to the observation deck. The view showed dozens of ships from different species working together in the space around Nexus Prime. Human vessels flew alongside alien craft, their crews learning from each other and building something new. 6 months ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now they were part of something much larger. The galaxy had given them technology, knowledge, and friendship. In return, humans had given the galaxy something it had never had before: the ability to solve its problems quickly and decisively. Blake smiled as he watched a human transport dock next to an alien research vessel. The crews would share information, trade stories, and probably end up as friends. That was how the new galaxy worked, not through dominance or submission, but through cooperation and mutual respect. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had proven they could end conflicts. Now they had to prove they could build lasting peace. Looking at the bustling activity around the station, Blake was confident they would succeed.